Alright folks, here we are from my place. I've given this demonstration a lot of times, but I've never been videoed. And I don't know how to photo edit, so you will see all the mistakes and everything else. Although there shouldn't be many of those. So let's start out with the materials. So the first thing is you got to go out and get a mat board, or order it, or it's on the way, right? So this mat board is white on two sides. It's made out of a piece of white paper on one side and the other side, though the white's slightly different. And in between, there are these yellow pieces. They're kind of fuzzy. The way that they're stuck together, they come apart like that. So since this is the material you're using, you want to think about all the ways you can use it. You know, I've had students in the past set fire to it and grind it up and make paste and paint with the paste, you know. Sometimes the fire can make nice browns, right? So, but when it's burned all the way, it turns kind of gray. And it's harder to burn than you would think. The paper stock is pretty dense, right? So we got big sheets of it, hopefully, right? For example, we got this one right here, right? So there's another one on the table that you might not be able to see because the contrast is not so good, right? So I've got a white thing here, and on my big table I have like regular paper, so I'm aware of that. Okay, other stuff. So where you're gonna cut, you got to be careful because you could destroy a piece of furniture. Don't cut on somebody's floor. I've done that in the past and it was a terrible mistake. Don't do that. You want to find something you can cut on, like an old board or an old cutting board or something like that. Something you can go over and over on. I have this piece of nylon board here. That's what I'm going to be cutting on today, and what I use at home. All right, so that's the mat board. All right, so the next thing, I asked you to get X-Acto knives. There are all kinds, you know, like ones with big, nice to hold on to parts, you know. And then the just plain Jane version and something sort of in between. If you didn't get extra blades, you want to get some extra blades. The meanest thing you can do to a blade is cut paper with it. So, right, we want to have plenty of blades to work with. The tips get worn out faster than anything else, and you'll know that it's getting dull by the fact that it starts to make curly cues in the paper or scratchy, or you must go through several passes to cut through. Okay, and then I asked you for some kind of mat knife, like these type of knives. Right, they're all versions. These two, you can take your needle nose tool that you've been using and break the little segments off and have a new, fresh, sharp spot there. These are just razor blades, essentially go into these big knives. So these big ones are better for long straight cuts, and your X-Actos are really good for when you have curves or when you're working with small detailed stuff. And you'll kind of play around with which suits you better, right? When you're making really small cuts, you can use scissors. Scissors can be problematic because they'll kind of crush in a way that the mat board doesn't make, but on small places, it won't matter. Go for it. Okay, we wanted a hot glue gun, right, and some hot glue to use with it. And if you have some kind of compass, this will make it easier for you to make circles or curves, right? I don't know how many of you guys learned about protractors in school. You can make curves and lines and stuff with these that are pretty interesting. And squares, we call them squares even though they're triangle, right? So these tools right here are plastic, and I wouldn't use these for cutting. I would use them for laying out lines. Please forgive me if I'm out of range sometimes. It's taking a little time to get used to. Anyhow, so plastic stuff you don't cut on. Like here's a regular, you know, plastic ruler. You can measure with it, but don't use the knives on it. So for cutting, you want to have some kind of a steel ruler. They make 12, 18, 24, 36, lots of different size rulers, and you want one that's metal. That way when you're going along and you're cutting, you're not going to cut right into this, whereas the plastic one, you can cut, you know, right into that plastic if they're good and sharp, right? So those are kind of the tools that we're going to work with. Okay, so I need these in a minute. All right, so another thing that you want is a pencil to draw stuff out. This is a 4H, so a 6H or a 4H, they'll have little designations on them, mean that the line it makes is very faint. You want to keep them sharp because you want good accurate measurements. You can use a regular pencil, just remember to go light with it. If you go dark, you'll spend a lot more time erasing your layout lines, and that's a pain, and life's hard enough already. Okay? So those are the basic tools. We can make just about anything with these few basic things on the mat board. Alright, so I want to go through some kind of basic stuff. So the first thing is you want to plan around where you're going to make cuts. Like, let's say you want to make a circle, right, with a hole in it. Don't plop it down right in the middle of your mat board and start cutting it right there. You want to be, you want to use as little mat board as you can manage it. Go to the corner, you know, and make a cut there. That way you have still all that big real estate, right? So that's a pretty common mistake, and it's one I don't think we can afford to make because it's not so easy to just go down to the store and get mat board. Though as of today, as far as I know, you can still get stuff from Michael's and Jerry's, but I would call ahead on either one of those guys, right? Okay, so typically what I do is I have people make exercises, right? So these little things will start off life as 6 inches by 6 inches. Now just real quickly, when you're using a ruler, this is 12 inches long, and I don't mean to be kind of a nag telling you about a ruler, but sometimes people get all the way to college and never really had a chance to understand it. So 12-inch ruler segmented into 12 inches. 1 inch has lots of different measurements in between it. You can have a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch, and a 1/16 of an inch, which is tiny, right? So each one of the inches has those numbers in there. So there are a lot of 16ths in there, right? So 15/16 within 1 inch. There are a lot of 1/8. There are 7/8 in 1 inch. Quarters, there are 4/4 in an inch, right? So you just want to kind of keep in mind when you're measuring where you're at. Okay, so then what we would do, or what you would do, is you start making boxes to cut pieces out of. So I want to make sure that I'm on screen here. Hope that you can still see me. So when you're going to make things that you know you need to be very straight, you want to work off an edge, right? Because I know that this is not going to be curved, this is not going to be curved, but by the time I get up to here, there'll be a little bit of deviation in there, no matter how careful I am, right? So this little piece was supposed to turn out to be 6 inches across, or 6 inches in diameter. So essentially what I did was I took the ruler and my 4H pencil and started laying it out, right? So most rulers don't start at the end, they start in a tiny bit. So if you have that kind of ruler, use that spot where it's in a little bit. Don't use the end, otherwise you'll be a little bit too large or too small either direction. Okay, so we're measuring out 6, why don't we just use the big one? So we're measuring out multiples of 6 inches in a big piece here, right? So 6, 12, and 18, right? So we've got our little measurements there. And then we go down to the end here where 18 is, and we keep the thing as straight as we can manage, paying attention to not tilting it either way. You want to keep a nice 90-degree angle between the ruler and the edge of the mat board. Get in there and measure off 6 inches, right? And then we can connect it all the way across, right? And my pencil is really faint, so I bet you can't see it. Okay, so then I can go back and measure this outside edge for my 6, 12, 18, right? And then connect my 12s and my 6s. Okay. So then, if I were to make this circle, I would be able to, free this thing and then put it in here, much like I did this one, right? Or well, then what I would do would be to lay it out, right? So if this is 6 inches wide, that's 3 inches in the center this direction and 3 inches in the center this direction. And what that gives you is a center that you can work off of, something that you can put your compass into and then make your lines. So we make the widest line by starting at the shortest distance in the mat board, right? Which would be this edge here, because by the time we get over here, it's quite a bit wider, right? And then we just kind of revolve it around and then make a smaller one where we kind of just revolve it around again, right? So that's pretty easy. And so once we get that in there, then we go back in and we start cutting it out. Now I'll just tell you that you will find cutting round things a little more frustrating than cutting straight things, because you've got to kind of move the tool a tiny bit as you go in a gentle kind of way there, right? Okay, so this is cutting circular, all right? So we'll put that aside for now. So the next thing is, you guys have all probably taken art classes where people talk about the cone, the sphere, and the cube. Well, right now we're looking at kind of a cone, right? So here we've got kind of a cone shape. But this thing started out life as one of these squares. And what we do is we take the square and then we measure it from one end. Everybody starts from one end and it goes out. How do we know where to go? Well, how we know where to go is by measuring a 1/2 inch up over this side and this side. Just these two sides, right? So I can go in here with my ruler and be 1/2 1, 1/2 2, 1/2 3, 1/2 4, 1/2 5, 1/2 6, 1/2. Right. I skipped one of them. Anyway, so 1/2 inch all the way across. Okay? And we have the same thing across here. And then what you do is you take and make all the lines run from your hash marks to the corner, because that's where everybody goes, right? So once you get those lines in, then what you can do is you can start doing your cutting, okay? So I'm going to take this and put this to the side for a little bit and talk to you some about cutting. All right, so when you're cutting, you really don't want to have to push very hard, right? So you're not in there and you're going and just like shaking because you're pushing so hard. You want to put it in there and just kind of draw it toward yourself, or not toward yourself, that follow along the line and follow along the line a couple of times. We're doing what are called release cuts right now, so the thing can just bend, right? So not so much strength. And then we just move on to the next one and the next one, right? So make a pass across there and another pass across there. So what it does is it makes it so our cone shape can open up a little bit and be flexible, like this guy here, right? So we go through and cut all of these. Now, when you're cutting, you want to move the material to suit you best. Like if you get to over on this side, you don't want to, be forcing your hand around and cutting it like that. You want to move it to your best spot every time, you know, so you can make sure and get the cut that's the easiest for you, and makes you not have to push down so hard, makes you not awkward. Because mission impossible here is totally possible if you make sure that you never put fingers in front of where the blade is going to go. You guys all remember how we were working with the wire, and the wire is easy to poke yourself? Well, this thing will do a lot more damage than the pokey wire. So the best thing, the best way to cut with this is to just never break this line, the cut line, right? And that's true if you're working with chainsaws or anything else. You just want to make sure that you're never making that line. So instead of moving this around and chasing the work, make the work move around. Okay? Okay, so once we get all these lines kind of cut, and these were kind of pre-cut a little bit, what you want to do is you want to take your compass, and if you don't have a compass, all you need is something that's pointy that will stick in the end here, and a piece of string with a pencil tied to it, and then you're making lines going from the corner right. It's a little long on one side, it looks like. Going from the corner, yep, to the corner, that's better. And then we'll make a smaller one going from the corner to a corner that we just decide how big we want that hole to be. Because ultimately, we're making one of these. So you might ask, well, why are we cutting this off? We're cutting this part off so that we can take this and fold it around so that the ends meet and the bottom sets flat. Why are we cutting this thing off? Well, if you wanted to make something that was conical that had a hole in it, then you would do that. If you wanted something that didn't have a hole in it, obviously you wouldn't cut that out, right? So you can make really complex forms by thinking about where the lines are going to go. But the one problem is that you can't cut two directions and have it work the same way, right? Where you've got this segmented kind of thing. If I go the other way and try and get it to segment two ways, the paper, the top paper, will want to kind of rip off, right? Because there's no way for it to move two ways at once, right? It's a plane essentially, so making it go two ways at once is pretty tough, right? Okay, so there's another one down. All right, so fold ups. So this thing here is not for chasing vampires away. It's just a little box here that we made that we could fold up. And you can make things that fold up and become three-dimensional objects in lots of different ways, but you always are thinking, how does that look flat as opposed to the whole piece, right? So you can make crazy stuff, hexagons and things like that. You just have to think through what that's going to fold up to. If we were in class still, I could show you a guy who made this kind of building thing that looks like a cat, and he just thought it through, like the whole thing, so he could just boop, fold it up. But I don't have that, sorry. Okay, so how this thing is made is you know that you're making a box, you know you have to have 6 sides, right? So a simple way to do it is throw it on the middle of here, and then instead of using 1-inch increments, you use 1.5, inch and a half, measured off of the middle part on these sides. You can also do it where you're laying it out all the way here, where it's kind of more of an X. That saves you a little bit more room like that, right? But you're kind of planning around how you're going to fold a thing up, right? And again, with the release cuts, you cut only halfway through. Like I'm through the white paper, and I'm through about 2 or 3 of the yellow papers that are in between, right? And so that way it flexes pretty good, but it doesn't tear so bad. So if one of these tears off, it might feel like a tragedy, but what you can do is take a piece of regular old masking tape and throw it on the back of there, you know, flat and neat, and get it connected again, and we can still work with it. Okay? So speaking of release cuts and the importance of good release cuts, so if you want to make something, kind of a corner, let's say I'm going around my deal here. So I have a little strip that's cut in 1/2 inch increments, partially the way through in release cuts, right? So I can't make this look quite tight to that. But I have another one here that's cut in much smaller increments where I can definitely force that around and make a tighter corner. And obviously you could make just one cut and have like a box-like, you know, flat 90-degree corner, right? So depending on the kinds of things that you're trying to make, you might want different kinds of corners. And that's all about, you know, how far away your lines are, your release lines are, right? Like you can sort of think of it as like this is 8-bit and this is 16-bit, right? Okay, so what's next? So, right, so here is a more complex form, and instead of having the release cuts on one side, it's on 2 different sides, and that way we can make it kind of go 2 different directions like that. Okay? So you're thinking all the time about that. Right? So this is a funny thing. I sure wish we were in class because it's very, very hard to understand online, I think. But here we go. So you'll notice this thing isn't a triangle. It's not straight from this corner on over to here. It's kind of a curve, like the head of a bullet or like a cartoon bomb or something. There's a slight curve in there, right? So the reason for that is I can take, and I got release cuts across here, and make 5 more of these guys and make a dome out of them where these parts fit together, right? So, but it's important to have a little bit of that curve in there, otherwise they won't line up. There'll be gaps, okay? And just to give you an example of that, like I've got a longer one here that started off life, where did that go? Yeah, we're not going to find that out right now. They started life, you know, like flat things like that, laid out with 1/2 inch lines going across of it that are kind of opened up like the others. And then as you curve it, you can make the edges line up like that. I've got some tape on the back there. So tape's good for preliminary sticking. Then after that, you can throw some hot glue on there and it's all good. But you can see they will get pretty close, and you can sort of visualize like a third one over here, and you have kind of a long dome like that, right? So in the same way, you can visualize the other kind of dome, this type of dome here, with 5 little friends that all kind of go together. You get 2 of them together, you tape them, you glue them, you get the next one together, and work them all the way around. It is really important with mat board, with working flat like this, to be accurate. You want to make sure your measurements are as close as you can make them. You want to make sure, especially when you're using multiple same pieces like this, that you're gonna get, you know, exactly the same kind of shape, or as well as you can do. You know, there are less problems the more like one another they are, right? So, and you can get more dynamic on these. It's easy for you guys to imagine this thing is kind of a dome, right? But you could take another one, kind of start with the same kind of warhead shape like that, and do the release cuts on one side, and then do the release cuts on the inside to make kind of like an onion dome, like those crazy domes you see on the tops of Russian churches whenever Russia's in the news. Okay? So, right? So big, yeah, these guys started out life as a piece that's in here that you probably can't see because I don't have professional lighting. But you get the idea. I have a third one of these in here, right? Okay, so what you're gonna do, I'm actually gonna go through a couple of cuts here. just because I want it to be really, really clear how we cut. Alright. I'm just going to come around and check the camera real quick, see that you can see all of what I'm doing. Again, we're all new at this. Yeah, I think that could probably work. We're in my studio right now. I don't know if you can see her, but my dog is right there. So, okay, so what we've got is that line of little boxes that I started off showing you. Let me make myself a little more room here. So I've got this little line of boxes. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to release all the boxes, right? So my first cut I'm going to make to get the long run done. And again, I'm looking for the best way to turn the paper so that it's easy for me to cut. Okay, so this is probably the best way for me. So line that up as close as you can, and you have to kind of always feel this hand that's holding the ruler down. Like if it slips, just stop and make sure it goes back. Don't try to fake it. Like you might be thinking, oh, I'm almost there, but if you feel a slip, you got to stop and redo it, right? So I'm going to get in here. I'm pushing down with the tip, but keeping an angle about like that. It's kind of the sharpest. So you can see I'm not pressing super hard. I'm not straining. That little piece of paper stuck on the end. I'm just kind of pulling it through, no big deal. Okay, so I think it's pretty much free, but I'm going to do one more just to make sure. All right. So 3 cuts, 4 cuts, I don't care if you're doing 5 or 6 cuts if you want. You just want to let the tool cut the paper. You know, don't make it a force thing or it'll cause you trouble. All right, so that's all released now. So I'm going to spin the paper again so I can get it, this little piece here, so I can get it free of the larger piece of mat board. So we're dragging it across and dragging it across. And then one last time, and I should be through. And it sure feels like it's through, but on the very end there, it feels like something. It'll be super tempting sometimes to just like find that you're almost there and just like, oh, I'll just rip it across, but it'll look bad. It'll immediately take some off of the one side of the mat board, you know, so just, you know, just cut it, right? Okay, so I'm going to put this out of the way. I'm going to take these guys here. I got 1, 2, 3 of these. I'm going to line it up as close as I can, always with a metal ruler when we're cutting. And then we'll do a few passes here. Sometimes these things will be sharp enough to cut little pieces off of the aluminum there. Just, if it starts to do that, make sure you know, give it a little turn so you're not digging in. Right? So, a little square. Pretty easy, right? So we'll get that on there. And again, not pushing super hard, though I am pushing the ruler down pretty hard because I really don't want that to move. Yeah, and I had it in 2 there. So 1, 2, 3 of these little guys. Okay, so what you guys are going to do is, what you're going to do is you're going to make 2 of these objects. So the 3-sided box, or sorry, the 6-sided box that we made, where'd it go? Right? Because that's pretty straightforward. And the circle. right? Remember how we were laid it out like this and have this, right? Again, the layout was measuring it 3 inches in, 3 inches in, 3 inches in, all the way around. So we had a center and use the compass to go around, right? So you're going to make these two things, you're going to make complete ones of these just as exercises. And I am aware that it'll use up some of your mat board, and I'm sorry for that, but like working with this stuff with your hands some helps to inform your designs and helps you sort of understand, you know, more what's attainable and what you're going to have to do, right? Okay. So that's going to be like an exercise thing. I want to see pictures of you guys circle and you guys box, right? So you might ask, like, okay, well, a circle's kind of, it's not 2D, but like, what am I really going to do with that? Well, what you can do is you can make a wall that goes underneath it, right? And sort of follows it around, you know? So, and you'd have a center one there as well and have like this kind of tubular form like that, right? Okay, so those are the two samples I'm going to ask you to do. So those are the tools, that's the mat board, and this is how we're kind of working with it. There's amazing things you can make with this, and what I'm going to do is figure out a way to show you guys some pictures of student work from the last, I don't know, several semesters. You can take a gander at it and it can give you some ideas. I'll also send through the assignment, and the assignment briefly is going to be that you are going to make a building, design a building and make it out of mat board that has something to do with one of the last 15 images on your cell phone. Right? So you'll go back, you'll look at all those images. And one of my favorite things to do with you guys in class, with students in class on this project, is have people tell me that, oh, that's just a dumb picture, I can't make anything out of that. And like come up with ideas for buildings for that. It's amazing what you can come up with. Like imagine a bunch of people, you know, in a big selfie with 4 or 5 people going across. Well, I start seeing their heads as like the tops of buildings, and like the way that their bodies are overlapping one another is connective parts of the building, right? If your last image was of a piece of paper with some writing on it, that could be, you could deal with it formally, like take and make 3-dimensional the words on it. Like I had a student a couple years ago make a Twitter feed building 3-dimensionally out of the mat board. Or you can take some of the text that's on the piece of paper and use that as a concept for the piece that you're going to make, right? You'll see more of that on the project that's coming right up, so you'll be able to see that. Okay, so that's what I got for you. I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about your ideas and stuff, and like what else we can do with this stuff. But like what's more interesting to me is you guys' ideas. And of course, you're going to come up with 3 ideas, just like we always ask for. 3 really great ideas of mat board buildings that you're going to make based on one of the last, did I say 15? I did say 15. 15 images on your cell phone, right? And if there's anything appalling on the last 15 images, we can go a little deeper, right? So this is going to be the project all the way to the end of the semester. We're dropping a whole project that we normally would have done at the end, which I'm sad to do. It was another site-specific one, and we just can't do that right now. So you'll have lots of time to work on this, develop this, and like get better. I will expect there to be things like nice clean edges where you're making cuts, and I will expect there to be, you know, like these things would be tightened up so that they're not loose anymore. You can see that these are a little darker. That's because there was a regular HB pencil. Then the lines weren't erased. I'm going to want you to erase all the lines. And can you use color? Hell yeah, you can use color, but use it intelligently, you know? Color is part of surface, which is part of a 3-dimensional object. So it's really important. Don't just throw color at us to impress us. use it as a fundamentally interesting part to the composition, right? So, and presumably all the elements you want to run through and think, texture. I had a really good one a few years ago where somebody covered the whole thing in sandpaper, and it was pretty excellent. I've had people take and throw glue down on the stuff after it was cut to the right shape and throw gravel across it, so the glue kind of stuck to it. Totally different texture. What about cloth? What about crazy corduroy walls and stuff, So there's so many opportunities, and I hope that you'll take the time to think about it, and I'll start asking for project ideas on Monday. That is, the next Monday from today, which will be Wednesday, even though today's Tuesday. Okay? So please get in touch with me if you have questions or anything. Again, 401-636-2677 if you want to text, or just call me up. Sometimes it's just way easier to talk. If you want to shoot me images of stuff that you're thinking about, that's good too. But I want to see your 3 ideas by next Monday. Okay, that's it.